Well, the BRICS summit is not just all about agreements and memorandums of understanding, discussion groups and deals. There are also various groups have been holding protests near the Vicentin Convention Center earlier today. But just to get a sense of what's been happening, parts of the events in and around the Vicentin Convention Center and the sidelines of the BRICS Summit, I'm joined now by Heidi Giokos. Welcome back, Heidi. Good to talk to you again here on Today. Earlier today, let's start there, we saw a discussion about the role capital markets, for example, have on driving sustainable growth. And of course, it's a key conversation that's been held at BRICS as a bloc in terms of growing the economies of its member states.
Yes, Bradan, so it's the second day of the BRICS summit, and there's a hive of activity, a lot going on, a lot of discussions with world leaders really trying to find a way to bring in that economic growth, to speak about trade, but also to really try and focus on whether or not they're going to allow further membership into the BRICS bloc. We do know that over 20 countries have requested to be part of BRICS. So there's a lot that's being discussed, but interestingly enough, today the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, which is the largest on the African continent, it is probably the most liquid. It's a stock exchange that really brings in that economic development and sustainability that is very much needed. And the conversation today was whether or not capital markets can drive that sustainable economic growth and development. So you had the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and a number of other stake key holders that really try to find a way to bring in that conversation about capital markets and whether or not they can bring in that economic growth. It seems as though there is a lot of potential, especially because the Johannesburg Stock Exchange is the biggest on the African continent, South Africa being part of BRICS, of course, and how we can play that role in really helping these companies. I think many of the challenges that we face when it comes to funding for small, medium-sized enterprises really was focused on as well today, and that discussion was how do we help these businesses, how do these businesses tap into capital markets to further grow the economy and to further grow their businesses. Something else that was also brought up today was the Chinese Investor SA Index and whether or not Chinese companies find South Africa a good investment destination and whether or not they would want to confidently invest into South Africa. The main challenges, of course, speak to the fact that we have an energy crisis, the fact that we have not developed our transport infrastructure. Infrastructure as a whole remains a significant challenge. All of this plays into South Africa growing, South Africa trading with the BRICS blocs and whether or not that is going to be improved given the many challenges that we face. But overall, it seems as though the Chinese Investor Index is a confident one and they do see great potential in further investing in South Africa. We saw how the Electricity Minister, Dr. Hossein Soramokgopa, today with the Chinese government further signing a memorandum of cooperation to deal with our energy crisis. So the plans are there. It's all about the implementation and really trying to sort out the many challenges that we face.
Yeah, that all sounds good, but on the fringes of the summit, there's some organizations that protested, not very far from the JSE that you've mentioned as well, also not very far from where you are this afternoon. What are these organizations protesting about? What are their pleas?
Yes, so a different element to all of this, Bradan, was the fact that you had a number of groups, a number of countries going out today and really protesting at Innisfree Park here in Sandton. We do know that the Sandton area has been declared a red zone, and this is obviously because of high security presence, police presence here, areas being cornered off and blocked off to allow for the BRICS summit to function, and of course because of delegates moving in and out of the area. So they moved them all to the park, not allowing them to protest anywhere near, so about 2 to 3 kilometers away away from the Santon Convention Center. But we had people coming from groups like Bangladesh, Pakistan. Also, we had people here from South Africa protesting about the Marikana massacre that we saw, them wanting the attention of the president. A big group that came out today was also around climate change, and this is something that all BRICS blocs definitely need to address. We need to look after our planet. We need to go a lot greener. This needs to be a huge focus. As much as there is a whole climate agenda at the moment, the BRICS blocs, of course, need to definitely look into this. We spoke to one of, if I can call, protesters who were out today really trying to emphasize the major climate changes and basically calling out China and saying that China is not helping in terms of really having a greener planet. Let's listen in.
So we are here fundamentally to say that the East African crude oil pipeline is a disaster. In simple terms, it is that. So this is a project that is being developed primarily by Total Energies, which is one of the main shareholders. But we'd like to emphasize the point that the Chinese state and various Chinese entities and companies are also centrally involved in this destructive project. What the project is, it is a plan to build what would be the world's longest heated crude oil pipeline through from northwestern Uganda to the coast of Tanzania. In the process and in its path stands hundreds of communities and tens of thousands of families who, even though the project hasn't been built and constructed yet, through the land acquisition process, they have lost their land, they have lost their livelihood, and all income generating streams. They have received compensation which is inadequate and unfair. And there are also numerous human rights violations surrounding this project beyond the environmental risk.
One of the participants at a protest not far from where the BRICS summit is taking place, speaking there earlier to my colleague Heidi Giokos.